Welcome to the Legacy Driven Marriages podcast, episode 30.
Woo-hoo.
Man, yes, Stephanie, can you believe it's episode 30 already?
No. Oh my gosh. 30 episodes.
So wild. It's really, guys, it's time to get into this relationship arena. It's time to have some fun. As always, it's time to have some real raw and candid conversations.
Oh yeah, today's going to be raw.
Man, for real, in order to strengthen your partnership with your spouse, because that's what we're doing here. I'm your host, Walt McKinley, and as always, I am here with my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
As we get started today, make sure that you hit that subscribe button. Come on, y'all, get on it so you don't miss one episode when these things release every Tuesday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
It's early.
Well, I got to hit those people on the commute. So today we're talking about one of the biggest marriage killers. I looked at multiple different places, and the divorce rate, 40% of the time, is because of financial strain and financial issues. So we sat back, we're watching the show on Netflix. We binged it a couple nights ago, called How to Get Rich. And it's super cool.
Really good, guys.
Yeah, and they bring in couples in various stages of life. I think there was one that was single, or a couple maybe that were single. This gentleman talks about how do you become...
Yeah, they address individuals and couples.
Yeah, and how do you become rich? Not monetarily. What does being a rich and having a rich life mean to you? And it's wild. Most of them, it's around having the money to get them the time back. But all of them, regardless of where they were in their life, have made poor financial decisions to get them to where they're at. But it's crazy. So we're going to talk about the top 5 marriage killing money issues and what you can actually do about it today. Really bring you that tangible advice. How do you have this conversation with your spouse? And what does that look like? And then how do you make sure that you're on the same page so that you can have an extraordinarily fruitful relationship that includes conversations about money? Because let me tell you, I don't know if y'all remember that movie Friday, when Pinky was like, playing with my money is like playing with my emotions.
Yeah, I feel like this one can get really tricky really quick because, and trust me, Walt and I have had our share of financial arguments. And that's a growing thing. Like you have to grow through some of this stuff, but there are some things you can head off before you even begin your relationship if you're smart about it.
Yeah, and for us, we were a military couple. Most of you guys should know that at this point, but we were a military couple for 2 decades. And for us, the dynamic was a little different because I would leave to go on deployments. And if I'm gone 6 to 8 months at a time, or I'm gone for 5 weeks of training or 2 months of training, whatever it looked like, Stephanie had to be able to handle the bills and pay the bills and know what was going on with our finances. And I also had to trust that she was going to do the right thing with them, because what we have done works for us. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But I've also seen instances where somebody would go on deployment, or just in normal day-to-day married couple stuff. You got one person that does all the bills. The other person doesn't really know anything about it. And then something happens to the one person that knows everything about it, and it leaves the person who doesn't in financial ruin, or they don't know how to pay bills, and there's debt, and it hurts credit scores. I mean, the ramifications of not getting on the same page in your relationship about finances is significant. And it can carry you into a divorce. It can follow you after you get your divorce, and it can really create incredible strain on your lives, both individually and as a couple. So we couldn't wait to get into this one today, because, man, I'm telling you, this is a game changer, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and I think both people, if you're in a relationship, both people should be involved in the finances always. You both should be on the same page. You both should know what's going on with your finances at all times. There shouldn't be hidden things ever. And that's kind of one of the big things we're going to address today, is getting on the same page financially, like having the same goals and vision for where you want to be. Like he said, like your rich life, like, and that's, like he said, not always monetary. That's what most people say, is they just want to not stress and just be able to enjoy life without the stress of being able to pay your bills and that kind of thing and that kind of financial freedom. What would you do if you had financial freedom? I think that's what we always dream about.
Yeah.
That's what we're striving for always since a young age. That's what we've talked about is we were striving for financial freedom, to have that ability to just enjoy life without stressing about our money. Because I think that's really what everybody wants.
Right. And your goals and what you think creates a rich life really does change.
Mm-hmm.
My goals and the energy I would put into creating income at 25 and wanting to be a multimillionaire and do all of these things in my life look vastly different at 46 years old. So these conversations that you have to continually have in your relationship so that you can stay aligned. And I think it was episode 28, we did shared vision and values. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to that one, because every aspect, including this financial piece we're going to talk about today, you got to have shared visions and goals of what you want to do and where you want to go. So we're going to give you 5 of them today. And we could probably talk about this for 4 days straight and still have little tips and tricks to talk through.
Yeah.
But
I think there's a lot more than even what we're going to talk about today, but these are, we went through a lot of them and we kind of felt like these are pretty key for the big ones that are going to come up. You know, there's a lot of smaller things underneath them, but these are the big ones that you really got to get in check if you want to be together going forward with your finances.
So, you know what? Let's just jump right in. Let's go to number 1 of the most common financial issues that married couples don't discuss. And that is the challenge of ignoring or not having conversations around your personality differences. Look,
Yeah, I want to jump in here for a second and just say, this is kind of like the love languages. In knowing your love language, you need to know your financial personality. Everybody has a different one, but the key ones are you a spender or are you a saver? Because we all tend to be one or the other, and you have to be honest with yourself. And then you also need to be honest with your partner about where you really are in that, and not hide that you do a lot of spending or you're not really a saver. And like, you got to be open about that with your partner. They need to know what to expect.
Yeah. And you got to know which one you are. Let's be real, guys. For me, having food's a big thing for me in the house. Even when we were young, you know, I remember the first apartment we moved into together. Stephanie was working 2 jobs in Connecticut. She had moved down to Virginia with me. I got transferred down to Virginia, got an apartment for us to live in. We had to have roommates. You know, when you're young, you don't have no extra money to have no apartment by yourself most of the time. And I'll never forget this older woman. She was like, they were like our you know, impromptu grandparents that lived right next door to us. This cool little couple. And she was so impressed that I brought all this food and not necessarily just beer or alcohol into this first apartment. But for me, understanding that why, and I didn't get it then, but why do I really need so much food in the house? Where does that come from me? Well, it comes from not having food as a kid, from being hungry as a kid. So these are things that created habits for me as an adult that I had to bring awareness to, because Stephanie, like, of course she wants food in the house, but she's like, we don't need to buy so much that, you know, a third of it ends up going to waste. And me, I'm like, no, I need food in the house.
I don't like waste.
And so
wasting things.
We had to have these conversations, not only around the big ticket items that we could or wouldn't spend money on, but what it looked like from a spender or saver, and then be able to do some self-reflection to say, where, because everybody's different, where do I spend and where do I save and why? Because we also know couples who...
See, I think for you and I think for Walt and I, we've done pretty well in the financial arena because we're kind of the same financial personality. We're both kind of savers. We both tend to be frugal. We both, you know, believe in saving for the same types of things. And so I think overall, like, big picture, we did pretty well with this. There were like dumb arguments along the way. Like sometimes, like I said, this is just the difference between men and women and what we want to spend our money on. This comes into play too, because like I said, you know, he would tend to want to spend it on fun things and like entertainment stuff. And I would want to buy new clothes and new shoes and things like that. And so we didn't always agree what we wanted to spend.
I don't want another pair of shoes. I want a new fishing pole. Why can't I buy a new fishing pole?
So we
But you
have
get
like
shoes.
dumb arguments about that kind of stuff because it was like, well, I don't, when money is tight, you're like, well, you don't need that. You're telling each other you don't need that because it's not what you want and it's not
Right.
benefiting both of you. So we kind of had to have an agreement of like, we talked about this a little earlier, that we had like a $50 limit. It was like, if you're going to spend $50 on something, it's whatever. But if you're going to spend more than that, kind of let the other partner know because it's going to affect our account. And then they're going to think there's money for something that there isn't. So it's like.
And for those of you out there starting to laugh because she said $50, it's back in the early 2000s. Okay. I get it. Inflation, that's probably more like $150, $200 nowadays, but it was 50 for us back then. And I think we had to really we're just really blessed that we think similar. So I actually think, Steph, you and I are more moderate in the middle of that. We understand the value of.
Yeah, we can spend too. Get me wrong, but
we understand the value of saving money. Bills first, saving some money. But we also lived payday to payday for years as when I wasn't an officer, when I was enlisted, and you were working at Walmart and going to school, and we were in that young person's grind of just trying to build this life and this legacy that we had. And then we always liked to travel. But there's a lot of times we didn't get to do what we love the most, and that's travel, because we just couldn't afford it. But we've seen couples where one person wants to travel, let's say, and the other person doesn't want to travel at all because all they want to do is save, to the point where they're not even having fun. It's almost like they won't spend $1 on something.
Well, like look at, we can talk about his uncle John. He's not around anymore, but he was a very frugal person. Like he was like, Walt would say they would have to line up at the door because the air conditioning, they lived in Arizona. So in the summer, the air conditioning bills, they're high. But he would be like, you got to line up the door and everybody run out because the door can't be open. That affects the electric bill. Like that frugal.
Well, hold on. Let me set the tone for this one because this is actually funny. We would get to his house and he would talk through his door, not with it open, as all of us piled out of the car. A couple of us piled out. And okay, are you guys all right there by the door? Everybody ready? We would say yes, and he would literally open his door up, and we would all run inside. And then he closed the door really fast. I mean, I'm talking about like, man, if you weren't fast, he might have grabbed you by your shirt and yanked you inside. But the electric bills, even back then, could be $300 or $400 a month.
But that's what I'm saying. Like the extreme of being a saver and a very frugal, and sometimes you can be called a cheapskate because they feel like you pinch every penny and you won't spend money on anything. And if one of you is in that extreme of a saver and you marry someone who likes to spend, well, it's going to cause major arguments, and you're definitely going to be arguing a lot about a lot of things because let's be honest, almost everything now is financial. I mean, everyone is watching their money, especially with inflation the way it is. I mean, we're getting to that place again where people are watching every penny. And so these arguments start to come a lot more frequent when we have to really budget our money, and some people just aren't about a budget and they're just like, I'm just going to spend what I want to spend. Like if I want that, I'm going to get it.
Like, I'm a grown ass man. Ain't nobody going to tell me how I'm going to spend my money. I'm going out there and I'm working for
it's very hard to, it's very hard to be in a relationship with someone who's going to have either one of those personalities when it comes to their finances. Like someone who's just going to be like, I'm going to spend whatever I want and you don't get a say. Well, that's not going to work in a relationship. You have to be able to compromise, and you both have to be able to find an equitable way to share the money.
Right. And so first figure out, are you a spender or a saver? Where are you at personality wise? Figure that out for yourself. So really think about what shaped my habits. Were my parents spenders, or were we broke? Were we always hungry and looking for food, or did I grow up with wealthy parents maybe and we didn't really have to worry about money?
Right.
Or do my parents have a bunch of credit card debt? Because no doubt some of the habits, you either went the extreme one way or you're the same. You have similar habits as what you grew up around.
And this is another thing that's really important you just brought up. If you came from a family that had money versus if the person you end up with came from a family that didn't have money, you might have really different views on money completely and how you're going to spend it.
Mhm.
And that's important too. And especially depending on what you're going to both end up making. So,
So figure out what you are. Talk to your spouse about this so they can figure out what they are. Talk to each other. Why do you feel that way about money? Not, I'm this way about money. Here's, as I really thought and went deeper, here's what I've realized about this. And maybe it's not a great habit that you need to find more balance in. Either way, whether you're a super saver or super spender, maybe there's a balance that you can have. But no doubt, having the conversation with your spouse, knowing how you think about money, and then figuring out what works in your relationship and marriage is critical to having a healthy marriage and not being one of those 40% of people that end up in a divorce. And you need to really be honest with yourself when you're thinking through this for you and when you're having the conversation with your spouse. This isn't about pointing fingers, it's about holding the mirror up. And we talked about that last week, and what you focus on magnifies. So that's challenge number one.
okay, so yeah, another challenge that we are going to talk about is failing to pool your earnings, meaning this is the
Oh man,
age-old discussion of
we're gonna piss some people
individual
off that have separate accounts.
versus a joint account.
Mhm.
And honestly, Walt and I are always going to advocate for a joint account. We believe you're a marriage, you're a team, you share everything, and including your finances. And I mean, and this is a really important one. I mean, I think your finances is a big way that you are really open and honest in your relationship. Everything is shared in, because we see that when you run into the individual accounts, you tend to have more secrecy, more what's the word, like doubt about, you wonder where there's,
What they say in the one article we read,
spending that
financial infidelity. And that doesn't mean you're cheating with somebody and spending money on somebody else, although that happens too. That could mean maybe you're just racking up some debt because you are trying to fulfill some emptiness inside. So you go shopping a lot and you buy things. And when you buy those things, you don't feel fulfilled. So you're in this perpetual, insanity cycle where you're doing the same thing over and over. You think that somehow you're going to miracle Hail Mary and get out of this situation where your spouse won't find out. There's a lot of secrecy that happens.
Also, people bring debt into the relationship. So that's something that has to be discussed, should be discussed before you even get together. Like, are you bringing in student loan debt? Are you bringing in credit card debt? Did you have bills that you didn't pay in the past and that's following you around on your credit report? And all of these things become really important if you're bringing them into the relationship. You got to be open and honest so the significant other knows what to expect and what they're getting into. And because it is going to become theirs also. Like, once you do combine, you're going to be sharing that. So it is important that you're really open about these, like, what kind of debt are you bringing in?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, some people have like a gambling addiction or a gambling habit and they hide that. And that's part of why they want a separate account, because they don't want you to see that they're gambling that money. Or there's all kinds of things that come up when you do this joint versus individual accounts. And I understand why some people want individual accounts, but it doesn't lend itself to bringing your relationship together and making it stronger, because you really should be sharing everything.
Look, guys, in marriage, what's mine is yours and what's yours is mine. Otherwise, why did you even get married? If you have separate accounts, and maybe we're pissing you off, we believe in one joint account. But if you have separate, even the business account that we have, Stephanie has access to that. She can look at it whenever she wants. She doesn't, because we actually talk about what's in there and what's not in there. Our main bank account, it's the same conversation. She does all the bills every single month, because that was what we decided was best for our family when I was going on deployment, so that she could maintain everything that needed to be maintained when I was out with no internet connection, without the capability to pay the bills. But I want you to really ask yourself, why? Why do I feel so strongly about having separate accounts? Why? Because really, you're sharing everything else in life. why can't you bring yourself to share accounts? And if it's because you don't trust, so one of the couples in the show we were talking about, he asked him specifically this question. And, do you trust him, because he was the spender in this, to have a joint account? She said no. She said no, not until he shows me something different. So he really had to be honest with himself, ratchet back how much he was spending buying Amazon all day and unnecessary things so that they can dig themselves out of debt and then create a financial plan that carries them into the future. So,
well, like for them, they had a shared goal of they wanted to buy a home. They wanted to be able to buy their house. They never owned a home. But they had individual accounts. And so he worked with them to say, figure out why were they doing that? And it turned out for that, yeah, he had a lot of spending habits and was buying unnecessary things, and she didn't like that he did that. And so she's like, I'm keeping my money separate.
and we've known couples over the years that have had separate accounts, and one person's racking up a bunch of debt and the other person isn't. And then when that conversation happens, it's like an explosion because there was no visibility into how the other person was spending. And so I think shared accounts really shows another kind of trust in your relationship, but you both got to be accountable for what you bring to the table for those moments. And you got to be honest with yourself, not say, well, nobody's going to tell me how to spend my money. I go to work every day. I work my ass off. I'm a grown ass man. If I want to buy a fishing rod, I'm going to do that. If I want to go have a drink with the fellas, I'm going to do that. If I want to do this, and you get so indignant, whether you're a man or a woman in those moments, you get so indignant that you're not even seeing what it's doing to your relationship and how that trickle of resentment turns into that fire hose of resentment that leads you down the path of divorce. Communicating about your finances happens when you pull your money together, and damn, your purchasing power, like you're so much more of a power couple in those moments than you would ever be without it.
Right. Putting your money together is always going to go further than trying to do these. If you can't see what you're both spending and know that, you don't really know what you both have. So it's always going to be better if you join it and you work together than if you're trying to do separate things. Like
And be honest, man, a lie is a lie, whether you're cheating on your spouse or racking up debt or whatever else. A lie is a lie. And that will hurt trust. And that's a really hard thing to get back. And I don't know that you ever really get it back. Maybe you can get 99% of trust back, but there's always going to be a little inkling left on there. So you got to really communicate about your goals. You got to create a plan together, which is called a budget, and sit down and budget together. Stephanie and I, over the years now, we talk about our finances a lot. We spend so much time together that we're usually spending money together when we do. But one of the couples in that show that we're talking about, she was the breadwinner, which is going to take us to our next point in a second. What they ended up deciding, though, is, okay, we're going to allocate 5% of the total income we're bringing in for each of us to spend on things we want. Because you're not just going to share, you don't want to buy all the same things. The big things you should have in common, but you're not going to want to. I want to buy stuff for the Jeep. I want to buy stuff to go camping. I want to buy stuff for fishing. Stephanie spends different than me.
I was gonna say, like, oh, I want to go get a pedicure, or I want to buy some clothes, or I don't have to be like, oh, good night. Like, I'm gonna get this and have to, that's the kind of stuff that I said you get into the petty arguments about. And really, you both should have some money to do some things that you want to do for yourself. That's fine, but just talk about and agree on an amount. But you should be able to share and see what each other is spending. Like, if you're going to be you have to be transparent in your relationship, or there's always going to be issues. You can't have secrecy.
And look, last thing I'm going to say on this one, it just shows lack of trust by either you or your spouse when you have separate accounts. And nobody can convince me of it any different. Now, if that works for your relationship, then do you.
Right. Like that couple you just mentioned, that he said she was the breadwinner and she was struggling and she kept mentioning she couldn't trust him. But they didn't really talk about or show anything that would make her not trust him. I just think that was something she was carrying from something in the past, because she said she was raised by a single mom. So I don't think She just didn't really know how to share like
I
that.
think she said her dad left when she was a little kid and left like kind of her and her mom in the lurch, struggling. Like we're worried about getting a meal, the next meal, much less doing anything extra. And so,
Right. So that's where the trust came
and
from.
that's where the lack of trust came from on how they were spending. And what it led her to do in this is number 3 is staging power plays. I'm talking about when one spouse works and one doesn't, when there's significant difference in salaries. You got to check your ego, man. And by the way, I haven't been perfect at this because I was the breadwinner in our family. I did go out and earn the money, right? Like I earned the bread, I earned the bacon. That's what I did. Because I went to work, money got deposited every single month into our account. But that didn't mean Stephanie wasn't working to make everything great in the house the best she could so that I can have the outside the house success and try to bring home more money, which was my goal, especially when I was younger. And in this moment, this woman in this instance, so think about the way it is in your relationship. For Steph and I, it was me, and then she was at home, but it was opposite for them because she made way more money in a sales role than he did as an electrical engineer. So he became a stay-at-home dad. He felt devalued in that moment. He felt if he wanted to spend $10, he was scrutinized in that moment. He felt that she did all the bills. She took care of it. She didn't even tell him about it. He didn't even know what the hell was really happening with the bills.
Right. He didn't even know how much money they had, what the bills were. He knew nothing about their money at all. She was controlling all of that.
So he didn't feel any value in the relationship. And I'm sure I've made you feel that way before about money, not on purpose, but because I was going out and I was working so hard for it. But you got to realize, and fellas, I'm probably talking to mostly you. You got to realize your spouse that's at home, or maybe your spouse isn't making as much money because they didn't have the longevity in the workforce because they were at home, whatever the dynamic is. Your spouse is carrying their weight, even if it doesn't bring in dollar bills. The things that Stephanie did with our home, with our children, allowed me to go pour into my work to put us in better financial positions year over year over year. And I didn't always acknowledge that the way that I should. So if you're not acknowledging that in your spouse and thanking them for what they bring to the table and thanking them for how they contribute, and it's all about how you contribute, you got an ego problem. And if you don't check your ego, you're going to have a divorce problem. And that's just being as real as possible on this raw and candid conversation we're having today.
Yeah, I'm just going to say whether it's like our situation, I stayed at home, he went to work, so I didn't bring in an income. Or if it's one spouse makes more than the other, you still should it still should be shared money, and you still should be able to have both have a say in how the money is spent. If you're going to be a marriage and a team and a partnership, you have to be able to do that. You can't act like it's my money and I only get to say in how it's spent and you only get this much. And yeah, then you're being controlling in the relationship, not being a partner. So that's a big issue that we're talking about. This is the financial issue that comes up is exactly that. Again, you have to talk and communicate about this and how it needs to be shared. It's not one versus the other. If you
Mm-hmm.
approach it that way, you're doomed to fail. And yes, we have had our issues with this ourselves because of that. Like we said, and I'm sure that's hard because I haven't been the one that made the money and him stay at home. So I don't know what that feels like to be the one out earning it and, feeling like you earned it, but you have to share it, and I have been on the other side, so I can speak from that, but so there's sometimes it feels like you're trying to make the other spouse feel inferior because they don't monetarily bring into the relationship, even though they are bringing a lot to the relationship. It's just not monetary. So you really have to have this discussion with your significant other about, if you are feeling like it's not equitable and they're trying to control all the money and they're not letting you have a say. And you do need to speak up about that and really talk about it and work through it because it's really important. It's going to be really hard to get ahead and work together if you're not on the same page with that.
And it's also vice versa, right? It's talking about what's equitable overall. So if you're out there and you're earning the money and you're busting your butt every day and you've got all this pressure on you and timelines and all the things that happen when you go to work from a day-to-day perspective, and your spouse is at home or maybe they work part-time or something like that, talk about what your needs are too. Marriage is all about communication. The better you learn how to communicate needs and wants and desires, the more you limit your expectations, the more you turn and put the mirror on yourself instead of the magnifying glass on your spouse, the stronger your relationship is going to be in every capacity. We just happen to be talking about the financial one today.
So there was one. So just an example for us was, because he went to work, there was a 401k with his job. So he put money into the 401k. Now, obviously, this is going to be retirement, and I would assume it would be for us, but it was in his name. And if something happened to us, it would go to him. It wouldn't be split. And I had to talk with him about it because I thought, and initially we started out, we both opened IRAs for each other, and we were
For
putting
ourselves, but
right,
together,
like
yeah.
putting into them equally. We both had an IRA. We were putting it into equally. But he started out. This was when he was in the military. Then he went into the corporate America, and they offered 401k with his job. So, and they matched whatever you put in. So we were like, yeah, I was all for it because I'm like, it's a great investment opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
But like I said, that's really in his name, and I wasn't going to have one. And so I did talk to him about like, hey, like I'd like to still invest in my IRA, even though I don't have a 401k. I'd like to have money in an IRA because I just would like to have that too. Kind of like it's equal. And we got into some arguments over that, and we ended up we did start to put money into the IRA for me, but that was a point of contention because even that kind of like this is just an example of where if you don't work, if a spouse doesn't work, they may not have the same opportunities even when it comes to that kind of stuff. So there are things but you have to communicate that and you have to be in the know. Like he could have been putting into that and I wouldn't even know.
Even though she was the beneficiary of it. But the thing is, I had to have some empathy for her to say, because it was a 6% match, right? So if I put 6% and they match 6%, I'd have some empathy for her to say, okay, a fear that she'll probably always have is because she sacrificed her entire lifespan, that if I did leave, she'd get half and spouse support, like all those things would happen, I'm sure. But would she be stuck later?
Well, yeah, this is what I was going to say. For the person staying at home, like for me, or if you make less money, I would think about like if something did happen to him or it did divorce, I'm putting all my trust in him. I'm totally trusting him to provide for me because I have no income. And if I were to be out on the street, like, or
Starting over.
Yeah, if I was starting over by myself, now I sacrificed not working. So now I don't have a career that would make me money like that. I'd be starting at the bottom, not making money. And now I have no backup for myself. And so I'm putting so much trust in him that he can't understand because he's going to be set. He doesn't have to worry about that. I do. So it was like, I don't think you understand the level of like, I have to trust you on this. And like, if something does happen to you, I'm really putting myself in a really bad position.
Well, the thing was, I have to trust you on this and I trust you. But then for me, so I have a choice. Do I make a power play and say, no, we're doing it this way? Like I'm the one bringing home the money. This is the way it is. You got to deal with it. I don't know what to tell you. Or do I have some empathy for my spouse, my lifelong partner in crime, and say, yeah, okay, I get where you're coming from. What would make you feel comfortable? Well, what would make me feel comfortable is if we put some money into an IRA for me too. Okay, well, then we got to make some lifestyle adjustments. Maybe we don't quite save in our savings account nearly as much. Let's start putting some money in an IRA. And so right before tax season, we drop some funds in there. She has it. She has access to it. I don't have any access to it. She still has it today. And she felt better about it, right? So it actually strengthens your relationship, even if you talk about the insecurities and anxieties. Now I want to move on to the fourth thing here, because this is a big one, man. Like having conversation, the evolution of relationships. You get together, maybe both couples work, both people in the partnership work. Maybe you're joint accounts, maybe you're separate, whatever that looks like for you in the moment. You don't have a family, you're dinks, they call them dual income, no kids, but you're balling. Even with Steph and I, when I was enlisted and she was working a retail job, we had so much more money because we didn't have to worry about children and family and what that lifestyle looked like, or make the decision for her to stay at home, which is what both of us wanted, right? And teenagers are worse. If y'all don't have teenagers yet and you have toddlers and infants, trust me, it's cheaper right now. But I think let's talk about family collectively. How do you make sure that you're doing and on the same page for your children? Are you saving for college? You both people feel like that's important. Travel, sports, buying something for your kid every time you go to the store. Is that really what both people think is necessary, especially if you have a spender and a saver? And then how do you cope with your extended family with their handout, or always calling when they need something, or they're always, well, you have money. How come you can't give me any? And then what about the person who gives it continually because they don't know how to say no and set some boundaries there? And then the other spouse is thinking, hey, now we're struggling because you want to give money to your family, the same people who make the same poor decisions every single month. And I was okay helping them for a couple months, but now we're 2 years down the road and we're still helping them. And that's causing us a burden on us. Matt, you want to talk about
especially
some real
if like one spouse is always helping their family member and the other doesn't, but then when their family member needs help, you aren't okay with it.
Yeah, that's even worse. That you got one spouse that supports the help, but then the other spouse needs some help in their family, and you say no, boy, look out, because that's a fight waiting to happen. You want to talk about marriage killing money issue?
Emotions there too, because we've seen this a lot, and with a lot of couples that they're helping family members, and it starts to become a regular thing, and then they're like, well, we're not helping my family. And, there's a lot of emotional issues involved in that too, because generally that's stuff that has stemmed from the past and it's still there and it's bringing up old things. And
so how do you get on the same page about how you want to support your kids, Steph, and how you will or won't support extended family, or how you need to set boundaries with extended family? How do you get on the same page for that?
You do have to talk. I keep telling you, communication keeps coming up. Communication in every episode we talk about. That's why communication is the number one foundational principle in a marriage. Why it's so important, because all of this stuff comes down to the communication. We have to talk about these things. So if you don't like something about what your partner's doing with the money, or like they're helping that family member and you're not okay with it, you need to voice that to them. And you need to explain how you see it, how you feel about it, and expect that they might have a real reaction. There might be a real emotional thing for them there, that they feel a need that they have to help them, or they feel that they don't have anyone else. You just don't know. Like, you have to kind of get to the bottom of that. You got to find out, why do they help this person? Why do they feel they need to help them? And sometimes you have to get real with them and say, like, no, you really need to cut them off because you're enabling them. All those kinds of discussions have to happen. And sometimes, there's people, like, you get to a point where you're taking care of a parent, and that becomes part of your relationship and what that can bring with it. And like we said with the kids, so many expenses involved in raising kids, and things Walt and I have gotten in disagreement about when we got our daughter a car and what we wanted to spend on that car for her. And, I had a smaller budget.
My budget was bigger
because he's a dad and it's his little girl, and he's worried about, safety and protection. And I'm thinking, like, they need to learn to earn it. And we came from totally different places on that. So believe me, there was some real discussions about that and some compromising happening. And
truth.
Yeah, these can become really big issues in relationships. So you have to And also you have to be recognizing that if you're the one that is contributing to the family member, or, you know, you have to understand where the other one's coming from, or why they feel like maybe you shouldn't, and vice versa.
So I think at the end of the day, Steph hit the nail on the head. You got to communicate about it. Be honest and vulnerable in the communication, how you feel about it, because we got to get our feelings out and on the table. Because if we don't, it's just resentment. And it's not a binary yes or no. It's none of these conversations you ever have in a relationship should be yes or no. My way, go F yourself. Because that's where it gets sometimes. Create a plan that makes sense where both people feel like there's been some compromise for the other one. And once you agree on that plan, then you guys are moving forward together, and you're going to get to whatever that looks like faster by doing that. And at the end of the day, your spouse, that's your lifelong partner, man. Like, that's the commitment that you made when you got married. Your brother, your sister, your parent, your best friend, all these other people that want, take sometimes, that's not, they're not the ones serving you every single day in your relationship in your life. So you've got to prioritize the most important relationship, and that's the one with your spouse. And including if you do have a family member come live. Steph and I already talked about it. Her parents are getting up there. If they ever had to come live someplace, it would be with us. Does that come with some challenges? Sure. But the thing is, I love my wife enough to know that we're going to take care of her parents if it comes down to it. That's my compromise. Conversely, we've had my sister live with us twice. We've had my brother live with us twice in life, right? She made those concessions because it was my family. But I didn't make those decisions autonomously, like, we're doing this. We talked about it. We had a discussion. We reached a compromise. And then we went forward from there. And matter of fact, the second time my brother lived with us, Stephanie was like, I was saying no. Stephanie said we should give him another shot. And so then we did, right? So, but it was all compromise, and it was based upon love, not based upon power, or it's got to be my way, or, well, it's my family. You don't love my family like I do. So why would I expect you to do it? Man, the arguments that can happen and how quickly that slippery slope is to divorce is ridiculous. And then I want to give this next one. This next one's so big, guys. And we did shared vision and values 2 episodes ago because it's so big on your entirety of your relationship. You're going to go through all these seasons of your relationship. Steph and I have went through empty nest single, dual income, no kids, to kids, to family members living with us sometimes, to now almost empty nesters, because we have one kid in college and one kid that's a junior in high school. If you don't share vision and goals for what you want to do in your life, regardless of what piece of that life looks like, you're going to really struggle in your relationship. If you don't start to think, and the second time divorce is big, the second highest rate of divorce outside of when kids are little, are when people become empty nesters because they stay together for the kids, or their vision and goal was really based upon the kids and growing their family. And then all of a sudden one day they're staring at each other in the face thinking, I don't even really like you anymore. We're so disconnected. Like, all you want to do is go golf and I want to go travel. You got to get on the same page where you still have your individual interests and you still want to go do those things, but you also have some shared interest in your dream building together about your future goals and what that looks like, and scheduling these monthly check-ins that you should be doing around your finances to ensure that your shared vision and goals, for the most part, remains the same. 50% of what you're thinking about for your future should include your spouse. 75% should include your spouse. 25%-ish should be the nuances between your personalities, or man versus a woman, or whatever that looks like, where you do have different interests just because that's the way you are.
Yeah. Like you said, we did a whole episode on this because that's how strongly we feel about having the shared vision and goals in your relationship. You know, like we said, I talked about that couple earlier, like wanting to buy a home. That's usually a big couple goal. And it does require both of you working towards it to get it. And, you know, we talked about we're approaching this different phase of life. So our goals have changed. What we wanted back then when we started in our 20s and what we want now in our 40s are really different. we want, you know, now we're looking at like, how can we give back? How can we impact? How can we, it's changed from like trying to attain things to and provide for our family to now like, how do we give back in the
Right.
society
And
or
how do
the
we create
community?
experiences via traveling that we
Hmm.
both want to do together? It's
Right.
kind of
And
both, right?
there's,
It's
we want to,
experiences and service.
yeah, now we're like, we spent a lot of time grinding and raising a family. And now we're like, we're getting to that point of life where we're like, we want to enjoy ourselves a little bit. We want to just get out and travel and see the world. And that's kind of become more of our shared vision is that. And eventually raising grandkids or, being part of their life. And,
Hmm.
we have some couple different goals like that. Like, we may eventually want a different type of home, but we're still kind of discussing what that actually is because
Hmm.
we know we don't need this size home anymore. So it's like a lot is changing where it's like the things we needed to raise a family we don't need now, and it's this is a one of the biggest transitions in life is becoming an empty nester. Or I just heard someone on the show the other day say that they don't like calling it empty nesting, that's too depressing, so they call it like their a next honeymoon or something like that, or
Oh
like
yeah,
a
yeah. I think it was literally the next honeymoon. I think is what they
something
called
like
it.
that, a second honeymoon.
Second, no, second honeymoon. That's what it was. Second honeymoon.
um which I thought was pretty cool because it's true. It's like, man, it's we were talking about this recently because it's we've never been on so many dates as when we were first together
Right.
before
Now we just have
kids.
more
And
money to take nicer dates. That's the only difference now.
yeah, it's like so it's a little different. It's like when you were young, you didn't have a lot of money, but you were young and had a lot of energy, and so it's different. And now it's like more of a, okay, we're not young, like we can do the same type of things, but we have more money to do cooler
Hmm.
things. And like, but we've even gone to where like we're going to movies again, and like we didn't go to movies for years
Yeah.
because with the kids. So it's like really cool to kind of date your spouse again, and
Hmm.
kind of like you're gaining that freedom back that you had before you had kids, that you kind of forgot what was even like. So
Yeah. And I mean, as you get older, maybe it's like, hey, we're gonna go do this stuff tonight, and you get all excited, but let's take our naps first. I like my little afternoon.
it's a lot earlier.
Yeah, yeah. Or man, you want to go out at 9? What you talking about? So I think really dream building together is such a crucial part. Steph and I just talked about this around finances a couple days ago, and I asked her, I was like, hey,
Well, now, yeah, we're talking about what kind of money would make us comfortable.
right, what do we want to build in our marriage workshops and the book that we're writing? Where do we want to be from an income perspective that we would feel really good about it? Because I think for either of us, going and staying at the Ritz or renting a yacht or doing so, we have zero motivation when it comes to that. I'm cool staying at Marriott's and Hilton's.
Because
That's fine.
seriously, we're talking about how much more money we're going to have just because not paying for our kids.
Right.
You gain a lot more money not having to pay for them anymore.
And she did bills yesterday. We sat down after she was done and we talked about the budget and we talked about what it looks like and how much money we spent. Did we overspend? Did we underspend?
We're huge budget people.
Where was some extra expenses? But we're talking about it as a couple. We're talking about the dream. And if we create this much more income every single month, man, that could really get us on the vacations 4 to 6 times a year that we really want to take. Not overly opulent ones, but it can allow us to go do the things that we've been wanting to do for a long time that we haven't always had the funds for. So dream building and getting on the same page. And now we're creating a plan to get us there with our shared vision. And when you have two people working together towards a shared vision, it's not just times 2, it's more times 10.
Yeah, I think for Walt and I, like, we have a travel bucket list. Like, we have places we know we want to see before we die. So we're kind of like, well, how can we get there? What's it going to require? We're talking about even how much we want, like, when and how much do we want to take a vacation? We were just saying that, like, we'd like to take one like every quarter of the year, like 4 times a year. So, like, every season we can be going on some kind of getaway, but we need a certain amount of money to be able to do that. And so we're trying to game plan, how can we get to that? And it requires both of us to say what kind of things we're willing to do.
And also, it allows both of us to think we shared our goal, we created a plan, we're moving in that direction. Stephanie's terrified about getting up in front of people and having these conversations, but she knows if we're doing workshops, that's what she's got to do. we're building a website right now. Oh, I have not tech like that. And
Neither of us.
thank God we're still married now, so you guys know, because that was definitely frustrating. And we really didn't get on each other's nerves too much. But I'm doing stuff outside of my comfort zone because of that. So because we share the vision, because we're moving forward hand in hand towards the plan, we're growing in how we love each other and how we communicate. And we're going to hit that goal so much faster. We're going to be the power couple that we want to be so much faster than we ever would if we were individually chasing our own thing. And that's what this whole thing has been about, guys. The top 5 marriage killing money issues and what to do about it. We gave you 5 things with 5 solutions. Now it's up to you to stop playing small in your relationship. It's up to you to stop being scared to have the conversation. It's up to you to check your ego. It's up to you to create a shared vision with your spouse.
I just want to run through those 5 things again in case you kind of got lost in there. It's so determining your personality or your money personality. Basically, are you a spender or a saver? Communicate that with your partner. Failing to pool your earnings. So having that joint account. Why are you scared to have the joint account? You need to discuss that. Or what's holding you back? And carrying old debts and things like that. Are you bringing those things in to the relationship, or are you not being open and honest about the ones that you have? Staging power plays. That's where we talked about one spouse works and one doesn't, or one makes more than the other. And are you using that as a power play instead of working together with your spouse? Supporting a growing family, the cost that it really is to raise a family. And also on that extended family, if you're supporting extended family members or helping them out, like what is that? What are you bringing into the relationship when it comes to that? And then this is lastly, right? Having those shared vision and goals. You got to be aiming for something together. You got to have a dream together, work towards it together. It really unites you as a couple like nothing else.
Yeah, and I think so. Great recap, by the way. Dig in. Go all in on this. Every episode, we're talking about communication because that is the pillar of marriage. The reason the episodes end up being 40, 50 minutes, and the reason we add so much context and color and stories is because we want to really drive home what that means versus giving you vanilla answers every single time. Really context and tangible things that can execute a plan to make your marriage the best it can possible to be. To be that example for your kids, the other people in your community, your friends, to help elevate everyone around you because you're willing to elevate yourself. And look, as always, we recommend listen to this with your partner. That's why Stephanie and I are doing this together. There is different views from a personality perspective, from a man versus woman perspective. Listen to it together. Let us help you open up conversations that you might desperately need in your relationship right now. It's time to stop playing small in your relationship. It's time to stop being comfortable in your relationship. It's time to start growing and truly elevating your marriage and your relationship. It's time for you to really be the power couple you know that you can be, and frankly, probably your heart is yearning to be. So dig in, listen to this again if you need to. And as always, look, guys, join our Instagram and Facebook communities at Legacy Driven Marriages. This is really about bringing people together that are willing to fight and get into the arena of their relationship. And by doing so, elevate generational legacies to really create the amazing, profound, beautiful relationships every single one of us really wants. So come join us on this movement and really get involved with other couples fighting for their relationship too. But look, guys, we're wrapping up. So until the next time,
keep fighting for your marriage, keep loving each other, and keep elevating your legacy. We'll see you next Tuesday.
see ya.